Once Brandon went out, it's off a cliff. You want to point. You want to point to what the issue is on the defensive side of the ball. Point it right at that defensive line.
Football 24/7 with NFL insider John McMullen. The day after the Eagles lose to the Chargers, at the link here across the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, all presented by Stateside Vodka. A lot of ground to cover on this, the day after the Sunday loss yesterday. But before we get in to the game and talk about the defensive coordinator and the head coach and Jalen and all of that stuff that was relevant to the Eagles Chargers, Johnny Mac, the Eagles mourning a loss today. Mike Pitts from the Buddy Ryan era on this football team passes away. A young man, but passed away today.
Yeah, I mean, always unfortunate. The Eagles announced that probably about a half hour ago that Mike passed away. He was 61, I believe. And yeah, I mean, if you think, for people that remember, was right in that late 80s, early 90s Eagles defense, which was one of the best, obviously, in franchise history. So I think he had Buddy and Bud Carson actually over his span when he was here. Just a really solid player. Obviously, you don't think about him like you do the superstars the Eagles had, but, you know, he lasted over a decade in the NFL. So he's a really, really good player. And anytime you hear that, it's always obviously sad news.
Yep, no doubt about it. Well said and well stated. Eagle fans will remember part of that gang green defense just because of the way they played. And Buddy Ryan may not have been a great head coach, but he sure understood the mentality of the fan base, and he sure understood what it meant to be angry or to be aggressive, throughout his tenure. And I think today, John, I think the fans really do miss some of that when you're talking about the existing or the current defense.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. I talk about it with the running game from the offensive perspective. I don't like, I say it all the time, I don't like the way modern football is played compared to what it was once upon a time. But you either have to accept it or you don't have to accept it. You got to be a realist or you can pretend. You can't play the way Buddy Ryan played in that era. You'd get a flag every other play. And you know, the game has evolved to where everything is tilted towards the offense. And, you know, the goal is more of, I always joke, it's, you know, when you face really, really good quarterbacks, and the first half of the Eagles' schedule was loaded with them, it's almost like the Arena Football League, the old Arena Football League, where you want to stop, you want a key stop more than this mentality that you have to have a drop-dead great defense. It's really, you know, in the old days, they said defense was the one thing that traveled, and defense would beat good offense. Not today. Good offense beats good defense. And if you have the best quarterback and you have a top tier and you bring your A game, it's almost impossible to stop. So, you know, the Eagles have had a difficult time, and we know the 80% completion percentage, 90% with Derek Carr. If you talk about it, started with, you know, Dak Prescott, and you had Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr. Now you have Justin Herbert. You know, the good news is moving forward, you're probably going to have Trevor Siemian and Daniel Jones and Mike White and, you know, different types of quarterbacks. You've already seen this defense succeed against the Sam Darnolds of the world and the Jared Goffs of the world. there's no reason it can't succeed against those types of quarterbacks. Teddy Bridgewater upcoming, that he might be the best quarterback left on the schedule if Dallas shuts things down for week 18. So, there's going to be a shift. I would say don't get too upset. I mean, this team's not ready to contend, not ready to deal with the types of quarterbacks they've struggled with. And Justin Herbert, just the latest.
I can tell you one thing that they didn't do in the old Arena Football League, Johnny Mac. They didn't play zone, and they didn't line up 15 yards off the ball. Every one of those defenders was right on every receiver from the time they broke the snap. Even the man in motion, who was permitted to begin his sprint to the line from 10 yards behind the quarterback, was met by a defender right when he exploded and the football was snapped. So, and that, I guess, raises the question and of trying to understand, Johnny Mac, what we're watching. I concede the point, and you've made it many times. This is a personnel issue that is dictating how Jonathon Gannon is operating as a defensive coordinator. So, given that,
I mean, I think the most disappointing part is he was counting, and a lot of people were, I'd count myself in the same category, counting on this defensive line to perform at a high level, and they haven't. They just haven't. And yesterday was a perfect example. Justin Herbert dropped 41 times yesterday. Wasn't hit. The one time he was hit, it was taken off the stat sheet, so to speak. It was Steve Nelson. It was on a blitz, by the way. And they got penalized. The Eagles got penalized for it. Look, when your defensive line is not performing and it's supposed to be, we've been talking about this. Jody McDonald and I have been talking about this really dating back to the summer when we said this team has a chance to be better than most people think because of two reasons: the offensive line, the defensive line. The offensive line is held up their end of the bargain despite some significant injuries and even some other problems like Lane Johnson's anxiety and depression issues. They've held up pretty well, and they've performed certainly at a level that you would deem acceptable. I can't say the same thing about the defensive line. Anytime you lose a player like Brandon Graham, it hurts. But I mean, this group has been awful. And by the way, that includes Javon Hargrave over the past 3-4 games. Javon got off to a great start. He's been bad as well over the past number of games. So if they don't get anything from the players they're supposed to get, remember that defensive line was supposed to help sort of mask the issues in the back seven. Well, they're not doing that. And then it just, puts an exclamation point on the problems in the back seven. I mean, they can't get near the quarterback, any of them. Fletcher Cox, who has been a star in this league. As we mentioned, Brandon's not here. Josh Sweat, Derek Barnett, Javon Hargrave. Forget about the young guys. The young guys have not done the job. Ryan Kerrigan, veteran sort of pickups, Hassan Ridgeway back again for another year. None of them have performed to the level that you expected. Not one. That's rare that happens, with the exception of, say, the first 5 games with Javon Hargrave. And before Brandon Graham got injured, they were playing at their typical levels. Once Brandon went out, it's off a cliff. You want to point, you want to point to what the issue is on the defensive side of the ball. Point it right at that defensive line.
I don't know the context of how it was referenced last night in the post game. I'm sure you were in the room covering the press conference. I just heard the soundbite multiple times today. Javon Hargrave, I'm not the defensive coordinator. Now, I don't know if that was a question on something specific that was called or what prompted him to say that. Can you bring me back into the room? Do you remember the quote?
Yeah. Some people took that the wrong way. Javon was asked about should you blitz more, and Javon's a defensive lineman. Javon just, and anybody who knows Javon Hargrave knows he's a very understated guy. He was just saying, that's not my job. That's not my job to make that decision. I do what I'm told. And he said, I ain't the defensive coordinator. A lot of people ran with a different way, took the baton. It's not what he meant. He wasn't criticizing the defensive coordinator. He was telling the questioner it's got nothing to do with him, whether they call blitz or not. But I did find it ironic that the Eagles blitz Justin Herbert on 12 of 41 drops yesterday, 29.3%, highest rate of the season. Didn't get to the quarterback. So, I mean, you could turn 29% to 75%. If Fletcher Cox isn't getting to the quarterback, TJ Edwards isn't. I'll tell you that. Davion Taylor isn't. Andre Satcheray isn't.
What do you see, John? I mean, you're the expert. I'm just an observer. I mean, I think of Fletcher Cox, I think of the best defensive tackle on the team. I think of a guy that's done it in big games, and he's nowhere to be found. And I just don't know how to explain it. And then you had, and bear with me for just a moment. Then you had the Fletcher from the podium, which perhaps was frustration. And then you had right down to the trade deadline or right down to the wire, some smoke or some speculation as to whether or not Fletcher was going to be dealt at the, right before the trade deadline. I don't know how accurate those rumors are or if they mean anything. I just know the guy who makes a lot of money because and got the contract because he was so good at what he does is like not out there. He's out there, but he's not out there, and I don't understand it.
No, he's not. He's not performing well. He's certainly not performing the way he typically has, as you mentioned. I mean, this is a 6-time Pro Bowl player. This is a guy who made the All-Decade team in the 2010s. Doug Peterson and Jim Schwartz were here for 5 years. I talk about it all the time. He was, in those 5 years, he made 5 Pro Bowls. He was a 3-time All-Pro. He made the playoffs 3 times. He won a Super Bowl. If you want to criticize Jonathon Gannon for something, I think a legitimate criticism is playing some of the defensive linemen in techniques they're not comfortable with. Fletcher Cox doesn't want to play 5 technique. He doesn't want to play 4-eye technique. He had all that success with Jim Schwartz playing 3 technique. That's what he wants to play. That's why he was unhappy. And yes, the Eagles tried to trade him at the trade deadline. And I think actually the Von Miller deal kind of complicated things because Denver was able to get so much in return. I think that kind of amped up the Eagles' expectations. They weren't able to do it. And now you're stuck with a player who's very expensive, unhappy. And oh, by the way, he turns 31 in December. We always talk about this, 30 is a dirty word in the NFL for a reason. Guys hit a wall. Guys start to descend. Especially players who played as much as Fletcher Cox. Maybe it's just as simple as that. Maybe it's just as simple he's not the player he once was. You can go all the way back to when Chip Kelly was here and Fletcher was asked to play 5 technique. He didn't have a problem with it. He didn't have a problem with it because he wasn't an established player. Now I just told you what happened during the Jim Sports era. He became the second best defensive tackle in football behind Aaron Donald. So now he's got different expectations. He's saying what I just said. I'm a 5-time Pro Bowl player. I'm a 3-time All Pro. I won a Super Bowl. Play me where I had that success. The Eagles aren't doing that all the time. He still plays 3 technique more than any other position he's asked to play, technique he's asked to play. And oh, by the way, he's not successful. So, I always say you're not a star in perpetuity in the NFL. People, too many fans say this guy's a star, this guy's a big name, this guy's this guy's that. Everybody hits the wall. Maybe Fletcher Cox has hit the wall.
Well, I'll say this and move on. It's one thing to hit the wall. It's another to fall so far, to fall completely off to the cliff where you're unrecognizable a year later.
Well, I don't think it's I don't think Fletcher of 2020 was the Fletcher Cox of 2018 or 2017 either. It's not like it didn't start before this as well. I mean, he started the descent, and he wasn't the same player he was. So it had already started. But clearly, I think you're seeing a combination of, okay, he's not happy and he's a descending player. And that's kind of what happens. But, if you use Pro Football Focus as a grade. So go back to 2016, which is when Jim Schwartz got here. Fletcher Cox was graded 7 of 127 defensive tackles in the NFL. 2017, it was 4 out of 124. 2018, it was 2 out of 112. 2019, it was 5 out of 116. 2020, it was 30 out of 126. So you see the start of the descent. 2021 right now, it's 41 out of 123. So it's not the precipitous drop you think it is, but it is a drop.
Football 24/7 with John McMullen. The day after the Eagles missed a couple of opportunities yesterday and actually missed an opportunity to sniff a little bit closer to that last playoff spot. They missed out on that as well. More on that in a moment. One last thought, Johnny Mac, I want to ask you about regarding Jonathon Gannon and head coach Nick Sirianni. I heard the head coach today. I don't remember if I heard him in the press conference last night, but I did hear him today in his day after when he's on WIP in the morning. And I did hear him go out of his way, and he's done this many times before, to specify that he's the head coach. The buck stops at his door, whether it's offensively or defensively or special teams. He's the head coach. So I don't know how involved Nick Sirianni is with the defensive coordinator. Do you? Is he active? Is he engaged with him during the game? Is he, when they're back to work on Wednesday or Thursday, is he running the defense? Is he in lockstep with Jonathon Gannon? How does it work?
No, I mean, if you're an offensive coach in this league, you're sort of a co-head coach almost. I mean, unless you're a CEO head coach, we saw it for years with Doug Peterson and Jim Schwartz. I mean, Jonathon Gannon runs the defensive side of the football. Is Nick his boss? Yeah, Nick's his boss. Just like Doug Peterson was Jim Schwartz's boss. Um, the head coach is in charge of the game management issues. If you need to call a timeout, it's got to go through the head coach, things of that nature. But expecting the head coach, an offensive head coach, to run the defense, it's not how it works. Now, I advocated CEO coaches. I prefer them, guys who oversee the whole team. But remember, when you have that type of coach, they're not running the offense or defense. They're running the whole team, and they're delegating from above. And that would be, if I were the owner of an NFL team, that would be my preference. That would be, but even those types of coaches, the Bill Belichick's of the world, would be obviously the most notable. He's still, so-called right-handed to the defensive side of the football, is his dominant side. Everybody's got a dominant side. There are coaches, though, maybe John Harbaugh is the best example of this in Baltimore, because he came up under Andy Reid as a special teams guy. He doesn't run the offense or defense. He runs the team, and he's had tremendous success in Baltimore. And by the way, if the Eagles could get him back, they probably would have got him back numerous times. Jeffrey Lurie loves him. But no, I mean, say Nick Sirianni's got to run the defense. No, that's not how the NFL works. Very similar to what I said about, people wishing for the days of Buddy Ryan. It's a modern NFL. I mean, you can't expect Nick Sirianni to run the defense.
Not run the defense, but when he's standing on the sideline in a tie football game, begging and waiting and hoping internally to get one last shot to get the offense on the field, and it keeps slipping away with each snap of the football. Does he get involved? Does he go over and say, hey, just let him score a touchdown so we can get the football back? I don't know. Does he do any of that or no?
I mean, if you want to go that route, yeah. I mean, he could say some strategy. There's not many coaches, when you're in a desperate situation, and time is running out, you might say, okay, let him score. Let's try to get the football back. Let's try for a Hail Mary, whatever. In a strategy type situation. You don't want Nick Sirianni's expertise is the offensive side of the football. You don't want him overruling a defensive coach. Look, I know Eagles fans don't have much respect for Jonathon Gannon right now. If the Eagles didn't hire Jonathon Gannon, Brandon Staley was going to hire Jonathon Gannon. And if Brandon Staley wasn't going to hire Jonathon Gannon, there were about 2 or 3 other teams that were going to hire Jonathon Gannon. The Eagles weren't on an island. They were on an island with Nick Sirianni. They were not on an island when it came to Jonathon Gannon. This guy is tremendously well respected around the NFL. Nick Sirianni would be the worst coach in the history of the world if he tried to tell Jonathon Gannon how to run defensive football. I mean, that's just dumb. I don't know what other way to put it. I mean, that's like Doug Peterson. That would be the same thing Doug Peterson telling Jim Schwartz, another person Eagles fans don't like, how to run the defensive side of the football. It doesn't make any sense.
No, but when you're the CEO and you're in charge, and if the buck truly does stop at your front door, which you go out of your way to say, any chance you get an opportunity to say it, and you start to look at the numbers, the analytics, and what's happening on that side of the football, at some point, I would think or assume that invincible reputation of being a great defensive coordinator comes into question. And it looks like right now it's in the question. Jonathon Gannon people are starting to question whether or not he even knows what he's doing.
Well, that's the emotion of losing, and that's the emotion of poor performance. That's the emotion of lack of personnel. That's the emotion. You've already seen the defense work. You saw it work in Carolina to a high level. You saw it work in Detroit to a high level. Against obviously quarterbacks that aren't equipped to deal with some of the issues. If it were just bad, you've seen Carolina win some football games. You've seen Sam Darnold succeed earlier in the season. That kind of gives you a gauge. If it were consistently bad throughout the season, then you might say, okay. But, you always go back to Jonathon Gannon's mentor, so to speak, and that's Mike Zimmer. And Mike Zimmer is taking a lot of hits as a head coach right now. Probably, not a good head coach. But defensively, I mean, you go down his resume until 2020, it was ridiculous. I mean, it was top five defense, top five defense, top five defense, year after year after year after year. Then he loses 3 cornerbacks in free agency. His best defensive lineman gets hurt, is out for the season. The other one leaves in free agency. His best 2 linebackers get hurt. Guess what? Bottom 5 defense. Did he get dumb all of a sudden? Personnel wins in the NFL. The Eagles have significant issues on the back 7 when it comes to personnel, most notably linebacker and safety. The hope was that defensive line could make up, and I go back full circle, could make up for those deficiencies. We all thought Fletcher Cox was going to be Fletcher Cox. We thought Brandon Graham was going to be out there being Brandon Graham. We thought Josh Sweat was going to have a breakout season. We thought Javon Hargrave was going to be an all-pro after the first 3 or 4 games. We thought Derek Barnett would have a decent season because he's on a contract year. We thought Milton Williams could be effective as a rookie player. None of them have lived up to the billing. None of them, except for Javon Hargrave in the first 3 or 4 games and Brandon Graham before he got injured. Everybody else doing less than they were supposed to do.
Football 24/7 with NFL insider John McMullen. Before we run out of time on this Football 24/7 Monday report, the day after, it's our Monday breakdown of Eagles-Chargers, presented by Stateside Vodka. Don't forget, as the scroll tells you on the bottom, go to statesidevodka.com, use the key phrase JAKIB, get 15% off of the very, very popular Stateside Vodka soda. You'll get 15% if you're in Pennsylvania. Our good friends will deliver it right to your door. I want to ask you, John, about the offense. Go on the other side and get a couple of quick thoughts from you offensively. You're not going to be happy with Krause when I make this statement. But if I'm handing out a John McMullen game ball, which he used to do every day back in the training camp portion of our coverage here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, he always gave out a game ball. I'm giving Jalen Hurts a game ball for yesterday. Agree?
I would give, if I were forced to give one on the offensive side of the ball, I would give it to Devontae Smith. Look, and Jalen, to his credit, said this in his post-game press conference. Look, I thought when they were down 24-17, that was the Eagles' best drive of the season to tie up that game. And I think Jalen Hurts was great on that particular drive. What Jalen said, and again, I give him credit, he never got the football back because the defense, what we had talked about, allowed the Chargers to go straight down the field. Hopkins kicks the field goal with 2 seconds left. You go back to the first half, though. The first 30 minutes of the football game count. When Brandon Staley was given the Eagles opportunities. And, you know, you talk about the defense and say, okay, they didn't get to the quarterback. They didn't get any takeaways. Well, they kind of got 2 takeaways. And by that, I mean they stopped the Chargers on 4th down on 2 different occasions.
Yeah,
and what is that?
Stops. Yeah.
And what does that accomplish? Those are those stops I was talking about. You just want to stop here. You want to stop there. And then there were the 2 throws on the Eagles' first possession. Dallas Goedert wide open for a touchdown. Poor throw. Devontae Smith, the only target he didn't catch, should have been a touchdown. Poor throw.
Let me ask you about that one, that missed opportunity to Dallas Goedert. Does Travis Kelce make that catch? There's a better tight end than Dallas Goedert make that catch.
I mean, look,
difficult catch.
Very difficult catch. He got his hands near it, certainly on the football. There's a hope it shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, the Chargers had 3 tight ends, Anderson, Parham, and I forget the third one offhand, but they had 11 targets, 11 receptions. You know, when a guy's that open, would you like him to come down with it? Sure. But there haven't been many tight ends better in football. Jared Cook, I can't believe. So Jared Cook caught 4 of 4, Anderson 4 of 4, Parham 3 of 3. The guy's wide open. He's going to walk into the end zone. There's no way you can blame Dallas Goedert for that play. And his credit, Jalen Hurts isn't. I mean, that is a poor throw any way you cut it.
I'm not blaming Dallas Goedert. I'm just saying, could a better tight end than Dallas Goedert, Travis Kelce, make a spectacular catch, which does occur. Receivers and tight ends make great catches.
I would argue since Zach Ertz has been traded, Dallas Goedert's been a top 5 tight end in football. So there's not been many better tight ends. Could somebody have caught it? Hey, maybe Tyree Jackson could have caught it because he's 6'7". I don't, I'm sure somebody could have caught it, but everybody should have caught it. Any tight end, because the ball should have been delivered properly. That's the bigger issue, the far bigger issue.
Good stuff on Football 24/7 with NFL insider John McMullen. Right back to work tomorrow here on Birds 365. Is your partner returning tomorrow?
Rumor has it. I mean, we're all day to day. He's in Key West, so who knows? Maybe he just decided.
He might be loving life down in Key West, brother. Yeah. Johnny Mac and Jody Mac tomorrow, Birds 365 on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. That's my cue, Johnny.
Fired up, yeah.
That's my cue that it's time for me to say goodbye and end this segment. Great stuff, of course, from John McMullen, and great work last night on the live post-game show. Johnny Mac, appreciate it, man. We'll see you tomorrow on Birds 365.
Thanks, Krause.
All right, good stuff, Johnny.